As advisors kind of see that exit as the end, we know that that's not really the truth.
You've got to have a framework to get the conversation started.
You're listening to this and you've been in the business for 25 years and you don't feel like you're giving your best to the clients anymore. It's maybe time to start thinking about what does that exit look like to leave your clients better off and to allow you to go pursue the things that you enjoy. Welcome to the Total Succession Show. I'm your host, Tyson Ray, joined by Kim Cochenour. We're glad you're here. Subscribe at totalsuccession.com/podcast and let each episode guide you closer to a confident, well-planned exit. Today's conversation just might be the nudge you need to start preparing for what's next.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Total Succession Show. I bet you have a million things pulling at you today, like most of us. If you're driving into the office, you're catching up on emails, or you might actually be listening to this while you're on your lunch. Wherever you are, I'm going to ask you something. When was the last time you paused and asked yourself, why am I doing this? What is the purpose behind it all? Because if you're like a lot of advisors we know, you are amazing at helping your clients plan for their future. But when it comes to your own future or your own transition, you feel stuck and unsure. And that's where we think today's conversation is going to help.
And one of the things that we also are finding advisors are feeling is overwhelmed, and they're losing their joy of doing the business. Their energy it's starting to come, instead of getting energy from the business, they're losing energy in doing the business. And yet it takes energy to do a succession, much less to be thinking about one. And so part of this is the balance of bringing energy back into your practice, giving you hope for the future, and helping figure out what does a purpose-focused succession plan look like. And we have a guest today that's going to help us with that.
Yeah. So our guest today is Rob Brown. Rob is the founder of Truest Fan Coaching and the host of the Purpose Focused Advisor podcast. He is someone who's made it his mission to help advisors like you lead with clarity, purpose, and integrity. He's going to help us rethink succession as an intentional, purpose-driven process instead of something you've not thought about yet. So Rob, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it is a pleasure to be here. And just with all that introduction, I can tell it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes.
And we're going to have some joy.
Yes. Yeah. If we're not doing that, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
So, Rob, I think it'd be important. Can you start off by sharing your story? How did you go from running a successful practice and helping advisors rethink their purpose?
So I was an advisor for about 25 years. And during my career, I had the opportunity to also be part of the executive leadership team of an investment firm where I kind of herded cats. We had about 250 advisors in our firm. And what I found in that role was that I loved mentoring other advisors. It was just, that was the best part of the job. You know, there were different departments that I had to say grace over, but my favorite place to be was in our business development department where we did our training. I just loved doing that. And then it got to a point where that got harder to do because, let's just call it politics. And I said, let's just back away from the politics and focus on what I really enjoy doing. So I left the executive role. I kept my private client practice, and I ran both of those businesses kind of side by side for a number of years. And then I finally realized, I'm just getting so much more joy out of the coaching and mentoring. And I didn't feel like I was still giving my clients the all of me, that they weren't getting the best of me anymore. And I think that probably can happen after 25 years. So I sold that business to my partner, and now I've been doing this for quite a while, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, and that's why we're excited to have you on, because if you're listening to this and you've been in the business for 25 years and you don't feel like you're giving your best to the clients anymore, it's maybe time to start thinking about what does that exit look like to leave your clients better off and to allow you to go pursue the things that you enjoy is part of what succession could be for somebody that's hearing this. And so we're excited to have you on, Rob.
I just had this conversation 2 weeks ago with an advisor who had formed a partnership as part of a succession plan. And in creating that succession plan, creating that partnership, which was going to be a succession plan that was, going to be years in the making. This partner isolated himself. He said, I don't actually want to do anything any differently than I was doing it prior to the partnership. I just kind of want to have this safety net, I guess it was. And I was coaching the other partner. And every time I would suggest, well, let's meet with your partner, he'd say, well, my partner doesn't want to meet with you. He thinks you're going to tell him what to do. And I was like, well, you know that I don't tell anybody what to do. I help people figure out what they should be doing. But I finally got a conversation with this other advisor. He told me, it was so great to meet me. He had already met me. So he was in total denial. And then he said, well, what are you going to tell me? What are you going to make me do? And I said, I just want to know, why are you doing what you're doing right now? And why is that so important to you? And of course, the quick answer was it's like when you ask somebody about, their retirement, what they want to, or what the biggest goals are, and they'll say something broad like retirement, and they just don't have that answer. And you got the little answer, then and I started to say, well, tell me more. Let's dig into that. This is what I hear you saying. And by the time the conversation was over, I was such a rock star. It was amazing. And all I did was listen. In my transcription service, Otter, it tells you what percentage of the conversation you talk versus the other person. It was 15% me, 85% him. But it was just so important. And so, Tyson, when you kind of mentioned that 25-year advisor, the year doesn't matter, but getting into that point of isolation can move you away from your purpose, and you don't know it.
Yeah. So, Rob, that kind of leads right into a good question of, you did have some of those good leading questions to have them actually kind of sit in the soup to get clear on their purpose. But how do you actually help advisors kind of create that space? You already had that inroad because you were already coaching as partner, but how do you help advisors get clear in that time other than being a good listener?
Yeah, well, it starts with being a good listener. I think that pays off. I did a couple of years ago. I did some training to be a chaplain, so I can go into prisons as a chaplain, and I learned about the ministry of presence, and so which is just another fancy way of saying listening. And
Yeah.
so that really is a big piece of it. But you've got to have a framework to get the conversation started, because sometimes those questions are difficult to ask because it's so broad and so open-ended. And you say, well, what is your purpose? I was doing a podcast interview a couple of days ago, and I asked somebody what his purpose was, and he went back to his catechism from when he was a kid about, your
Oh,
purpose
wow.
is to be and
Wow.
it was great that was how he thought, and then we're able to dig deeper and back into that. So I have a couple of tools. I use an overall framework that I call the Truest Fan Blueprint, which is my blueprint for helping somebody really organize their business around the things that are most important to them. And the first part of that process is what I call dreaming big, where I really want people just to think about, what will life look like 10 or more years from now, in your business, with your relationships, where will you be? And then take that a step further and say, okay, but how does that impact your purpose? So why are those things that you're dreaming about so important? And I have a little framework that I use, a tool, I call it the Purpose Clarity Framework. That has a series of questions that kind of go along with that. But I can honestly say it's never exactly the same because it depends on where somebody is.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because if some people love geeking out talking about purpose, and other people think, well, that's kind of a woo-woo thing. Whoever, they don't want to talk about our
Right.
purpose.
But so in total succession, one of the things we'll talk about is the acronym, but of SPACE, but the S stands for seeing, and that's your big dream. That's thinking out in the
Yeah.
future and getting you listening to this, getting you to realize you do that. We are naturally processing, thinking about what the future looks like, whether we're admitting it to ourselves, and trying to see what your future looks like, whether do you stay in the business for forever? Do you get out of the business at some point? Do your loved ones want you out of the business at some point because you're too captivated by it? Are you called to do other things? Is all part of a process you need to go through to make these decisions.
Yeah, and I think you made a really good point there, Tyson, about this is something we actually do all of the time. Um, uh, think about your daydreams, your long drives, um, the nights that you're tossing and turning because you're just thinking about the future. You're thinking about your purpose. You're dreaming. You're wondering. So you've just got to take that wondering process um, and put it down on paper, for lack of a better way to say it.
So with some of that wondering and you kind of get that clarity around that, I think part of your process is actually the next step is figure out how to build or kind of rebuild their practice, reflecting some of the values that have come through in that planning. And so what do you see as the biggest shift that advisors need to make to align their business with that deeper purpose?
So, that gets into the nearer term planning, having a vision for the next few years, having a set of goals for the next 12 months, and then stripping that back to what am I going to work on this next quarter. That's all part of my blueprint process. But what flavors it is always going back to how does what you said is that vision for 3 years, that goal for 1 year, that action item for the next 3 months tied to what you said was your purpose? And the more you relate those two things, I think the greater chance you have of living out your purpose, having that purpose really evolve into a living and breathing thing that becomes second nature in all of your decision making. So it just becomes just a very intentional process. And intention is my favorite word this past 18
Mm.
months. I think it was going to be my word for the year, but it's carried over. Because I that's one thing that I think is missing in a lot of the planning that advisors are doing in their practices, especially when it comes to succession, because they are getting all of these phone calls and emails and messages telling them how valuable their business is, how important they are, because somebody wants to stroke them a check. And that's why I think what you all are doing is so important. Is helping be more intentional in this process of succession.
So I'm mindful that part of seeing this bigger dream or seeing this purpose is I too talked to somebody recently, and he is now seeing the lie of what he thought his purpose was or with what he thought his dream was, and or what do we dream about, that it's like talk your dream out to your mother, or your closest loved one you're gonna live the rest of your life with, and is that dream honoring you as who you are, or is it some fantasy, or is it some falsehood? And what the advisor was talking about is just letting go of the game of being in this broker-dealer ranking system, that he had to do certain things to continue to move up this rank to be on this list, and it was a competition, but it was all a lie because it changes, people leave, all of a sudden who you're trying to beat's not there anymore, and is that really best for you? Is that stress you didn't need? Is that best for your clients? Can you just let go of that because it was driving the wrong purpose for him? When you're thinking about what your future looks like, are you proud of what you're thinking about? And does it make you feel better as to who you are and how you're using your skills and your talents and your gifts? And yet realizing for some, I'm sure as you've seen, Rob, that for some, uh, you have to get out of the business to be able to discover what those new things are because the business is so taking your time and energy from you.
Yeah, it's pausing, getting some air, or in your vernacular, creating space
Base.
to do that is just so important. And you don't have to rush. If you've built this big business over 5, 10, 25 years, why are you in a rush to put, the perfect succession plan together in the next 12 weeks? Because it just doesn't make sense. And you need to be able to live with it.
Yeah. Well, and I think your purpose of helping advisors constantly go back to the vision and tethering that back to their actionable steps and moving that forward helps kind of keep them in alignment with where they want to be, the same way an advisor does with a client. When they sit down and they don't have the emotions mixed in it, they don't have that inheritance they weren't expecting. When they don't have any of those things in place, you as the advisor sat down and helped the clients make the plan for the future so that when those emotional things happen, they're not going to be able to get off track because you can keep that goal in mind. So, how do you help advisors who just can't seem to make that step to move forward? They're kind of stuck.
It might sound very unscientific, but you just have to sit with them for a while and ask lots of questions and ask them why they are saying some of the things that they are saying, because when you ask a question, very rarely will somebody not respond at all, but they may be non-responsive even though they've given you some words. But when you repeat back what they've said and really get them to think about um, uh, what it is they're really trying to do. As we've been talking, I've been thinking about a client of mine who just had a about a $25 million exit. And when we first started working together, he had less than 25 million under management. So
Wow.
he grew a big business in about 8 years. But in working with him, it was very important to him to set a very specific date for him to be done, because his wife is significantly older than him, and he wanted to make sure that he wasn't letting his business get in the way of the dreams that he and his wife had together, um, because he wasn't ready to stop working. And so that was a big part of the purpose behind the succession plan that we created, was to always be shooting for that specific date or that specific age for that specific reason. And a lot of stuff happened from the time we put that plan together until it was finally executed. But we never lost focus of, it was more important to him to be in a place that he could be with his wife for many, many years and do the traveling and the grandkids thing.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just a great example of what we're talking about. And by the way, he still says grace over a couple of dozen clients,
Hmm.
but that only takes him a dozen hours a week because of the team that he has, and he doesn't have to be there all the time. So it was a succession plan that allowed him to leave, to be done, as he called it, but also to stay in the business, but honor his wife, which was the most important thing for him to be thinking about as he thought about his own age.
So I'm listening to that. Before you said that, I was writing down. If you're listening to this and you're not clear on what your purpose is, or what that bigger dream is, uh, again, ask those before. If you can't figure it out, go ask those that closest to you what they think your dream should be, or what your purpose should be, or when your exit should be. I understand that married couples over 65 are becoming more and more divorced. And the joke is because the working spouse comes home, but I also think it may have more to do with the working spouse comes home to a spouse that resented that spouse worked too long, or that spouse had to sacrifice too much time that they could have had, that now for health ailments or different reasons or slowing down, they lost years they could have had because they never had the conversation of what should that date be? And do you owe it to someone who's loved you and or your family or your grandkids or whatever your purpose is to maybe rethink what is that exit date?
Yeah. No, I think that is spot on. And because you referred to that before, that made that story pop, square into my the forefront of my brain because it is the example of you can't plan or um, your business. You can't plan for your succession. You can't build a business plan in isolation. You
Mhm.
need other people around you to support you and to give you feedback. Um, and that's just so important. And taking the time to talk it out, where
Mm.
you actually have to say the things that you're dreaming and thinking to somebody who can call BS, um, um,
Yes.
or probably what happens more, they say things like, "I didn't know you thought that way,
Mhm.
and we've been, sharing the same bed for 20 years." It's so interesting to hear that that's what you think, and you get to reconnect. It's just not knowing that person who's right next door.
Well, and the trick to this too is that I was given a gift as a quotation inside of a Bible that I was given from my brother-in-law of all things for being in their wedding 20 plus years ago. And it just said, "Don't let the urgent crowd out the important."
Yep.
And the thought process of "I'll do it later" or "I'll get to it" is we are so inbound with emails and messages and research and opportunities to do different things that the urgent is constantly pushing off this issue. And the reality is, an exit, however you're going to exit, even if you're going to exit in death, is is a plan that needs to be worked out. It is not fast. And quite frankly, the quicker it needs to be, the worse it's probably going to be for the client, a team, or yourself or your loved ones. Much less the stress of it all. Um, it's a worthy and respect the fact that you've built a practice. More importantly, that has clients' lives, probably hundreds of lives that are impacted by this. Make the space, take the time, reach out to experts, talk to your loved ones. Um, because you owe it to yourself and you owe it to the clients. And quite frankly, the client should be told what it is. Much less, I was thinking earlier with what you said about the associate and the junior partner that couldn't pull it off. I was talking to a client yesterday that was going to sell it to his son. I asked one question. To your point of just asking questions, does your son want it? I don't know. He's worked there for 8 years. I'm like, well, okay. Well, does he want that much, debt? Well, I want to give him some equity. I'm like, well, you could give him cash from the sale. So the question really is would he like a couple $1,000,000 or would he like, 5 times that in debt to pay you? I don't know. Probably should ask him. Well, that's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that's been your plan for 8 years, but you
Yeah.
never had the conversation.
Tyson, that was, we had that conversation before we came on air. And I think it's worth mentioning the advisor that I was just describing with his exit plan is the one who had the plan to sell the business to his partner. In fact, we went out looking for partners and we found him, great partner. But about a year and a half before the deal was supposed to be done, there was some nerves around borrowing the money to buy the rest of the practice. And so it didn't change the purpose. It didn't change the end goal. It just caused us to have to pivot and say, okay, what are the other ways that we can accomplish the same thing? And I think we ended up with a better solution. Uh, Maybe not because of or maybe despite the the twist, the turn that we had to take. But would and that was probably the most nervous part of that for the senior advisor who was retiring was that
Oh,
was
I'm
it was
sure.
the only time he ever thought, well, gosh, this thing I have been so set on
Yeah.
might not happen, and I had
Yeah.
to like calm down. It's going to be okay. We're going to
Yeah.
stay focused on the goal. We've got plenty of time left.
Yeah.
And we had to bring in some other outside experts to just affirm that there was no need to rush.
Yeah. Well, and Rob, we've been hearing all along from other industry experts that you need to give yourself more time than you think when it comes to making making this kind of transition and decision for your business. And I think it's wise that you hold as part of your process accountability to the vision, accountability to your team, accountability to your spouse, and what you've built to give you enough time to do that. And so, as we've kind of been talking a lot about that transition, and as advisors kind of see that exit as the end, we know that that's not really the truth, that it's just really on to another chapter of their life. And so how do you, Rob, help other advisors kind of reframe this exit as an intentional transition rather than the finish line of their career?
So, one of the things that I really encourage my clients to do who are planning for an exit is to get them to practice what life will look like after the exit. Because it's easy to say, well, I've got all of these hobbies and interests. I know that I have plenty of stuff to fill my days. And maybe it's a little bit of too common an example, but, you know, say that you want to go from playing golf on Saturdays to playing golf, 5 days a week might sound on the surface like a great thing until you start to do it. And you realize, well, that's just more opportunities for bad shots, and bad rounds. And so I really encourage them to practice their retirement, practice their post-exit, really think about what they're going to be doing. The truth is, in most cases, the people that we were talking about, the advisors that we're talking about, have built significant wealth through the businesses that they've built. And so what do they want to really do with that wealth? Do they have some philanthropic or kingdom purpose in mind that they want to work into their plans so that there's a real purpose in their retirement years?
The right succession plan is retiring into something. I've always said if you've worked your whole life with the goal of retirement being not working, when you're not working anymore, retirement is nothing. But to retire into something and really make a plan for what is that first 3 to 6 months of retirement. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Who are you going to go see? What hobbies you're going to pick up? What boards you're going to get on? How are you going to take the intellectual capital that you've learned in all these years of working and give back down a different way that frees you up to give back instead of being tied to compliance and regulations and emails and phone calls and problem solving and so on and so forth. But you can also, again, part of seeing your purpose, and you were saying it earlier with the advisor that's retired or done in his terms, you own this thing. If you want to leave yourself in a consulting role, you want to leave yourself in servicing a few clients for a few years, the mistake people make is they view this as an all or nothing when it can be a both and.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. But it's because succession is a decision. It's not something that you just let happen to you. You mentioned earlier, Tyson, there's some advisors that think that they're going to be done when they die. Well, that's fine. I mean, there are a lot of advisors out there who've been at it 20, 30, 40 years and just love what they do, and they want to die at their desks, and they even say it. But how are you planning for that?
Hmm.
Is that a decision, or is that just
The
laziness because you
default.
don't want to think about it?
Yeah.
And so it has to become um, a very thought through process, so that you get to where you really want to be. And I also think that it's important. I had a great conversation a couple of days ago with David Bahnsen. I don't know if you know David. He wrote the book Full Time Work and the Meaning of Life. He has
Mm.
a $7 billion RIA. He's a crazy cool guy. And one of the things that he points out in the book, which I want to steal, is that you spend this 20, 30, whatever years in this business, loving your clients, learning how to do financial planning, keeping up with the markets. It is irrational to think that you can go into this period of time, this 30-year vacation, as he calls it, and divorce yourself from this thing that you loved and that you enjoyed.
Mm.
And it may be staying attached, working with a couple of dozen clients and still feeling like you're part of a team. It may be I have a friend who just retired And he went out and got his CKA, Certified Kingdom Advisor designation. And inside of that, there is a program where he can work with people who don't have means and need financial help. So he's going to be working in his retirement, and it's intentional, but he's just going to be using what he knows and loves and did his whole life in a different way with a different purpose. And it was intentional. One of the best. I had nothing to do with it. He's just a friend, but one of the best thought out retirement or succession plans I've ever talked through with an advisor.
If you're listening to this and your plan's to die at your desk, a couple suggestions if that's your plan. One is, does your team buy into that plan? Because one of your greatest risks of dying at your desk is in your later years, having team members that abandon you because they're not willing to wait around to take over or be a part of or be a junior partner waiting for you to die. Especially if what happens, and this is also a conflict within the team, is as we age, or as you were saying earlier, Rob, as you start practicing what retirement looks like and you're gone more and more, that puts more and more of the work on the team. Well, if the team is sticking around to basically be the future successors, how old are they going to be whenever that gets around to that? You got to start really employing multiple generations of people. And what we're finding is those younger associates want to be mentored, want to be
Sure.
sitting in a meeting and hearing how things go. And if you're out golfing 5 days a week and enjoying a work-life balance, you've earned it. Great. But how does that play itself out in your succession, or are your team or the successors resenting your succession plan? And eventually you're surprised that they leave, or in the end, they don't want to buy it. Those are all risks to this. I'm going to die at my desk. You can do that, but structure your team and communicate to your team and get buy-in from the team. How is that going to work? The other thing I would share is I've acquired practices where the most recent one was an advisor that he wanted a dollar amount, and he got the dollar amount and he retired. And then on the back end of the deal, then resented that he retired because he liked working. Ironically, he didn't want to, I was like, come back, just getting me the money back. He didn't want to get the money back. So he's got a pile of money and resenting that he's retired, but he doesn't want to let go of one kingdom to go back into what he feels called to do with this other. So it's just, again, take the time, see what you want to do, and then whatever that picture, help people paint it for you, then work out what are the conflicts, what are the problems. And again, we're going to seek to do ultimately with these podcasts and then with the Total Succession book is to try and, as best we can, make a effective manual. Here are the pros and cons of dying with it, leaving it to the junior partner, leaving it to the family member, selling it to another firm, selling it to the broker next door, changing firms, private equity. I think the industry is needing something like this, and that's why we're doing it.
I think you're absolutely right. As someone who has worked through successions myself and with the advisors that I coach, finding good resources to help facilitate that conversation through the decision tree just becomes so important.
So, Rob, one of the things we feel is really important is that advisors need resources. They need some recommendations as they're kind of trying to work through this. So we know you've got a new book coming out soon. Can you tell us a little bit about what you are putting in this book and how it can help advisors who are looking to lead with more intention?
Yeah. So the book is actually called The Truest Fan Blueprint. It's the title is my framework. And like my original Truest Fan book, it's told in a parable style, and it just walks through a conversation, an ongoing conversation that a group of people, business owners coming together, go through to using this intentional process to map out where they want to go in their businesses, and in one case, in a succession planning scenario. So it's just a descriptive way to see my process.
Yeah. And it sounds like it'll give the reader an opportunity to find themselves in different people in the book. Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure that we link the book in
Sure.
the show notes so that it's a quick resource. And so that's really great. Looking forward to actually reading that. And I know you also lead the Purpose Focused Advisor Mastermind. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that offers and how it supports advisors on this journey?
Yeah. Well, thanks for that question. And it's actually a perfect tie-in to what we're talking about, because about 2 months ago, um, well, actually, it goes back a little bit longer than this. I just turned 64, but for a few
Years young,
months,
years young.
yeah, yeah, I feel as old as I feel, but some days it's older, some days it's younger, but that's that Beatles song, "When I'm 64," kept coming
Mhm.
through my mind, and so for
Yeah.
whatever reason, this birthday was a little more daunting to me than any other birthday I have
Hmm.
ever had. Um, but then a couple of months ago, before the birthday, it was suggested to me that I go to a men's Christian conference with a bunch of evangelical Christians in Lynchburg, Virginia, home of Liberty University. Nothing wrong with any of those things, but it's not the kind of place that I'd normally hang out.
Mhm.
But I went. And when I got there with these 5,000 guys with their hands in the air singing and praising God, and me just kind of going, maybe I can get one hand up. I was wondering, why, God, am I here? Why did you bring me here? And he answered directly back to me. It was a whisper, and he said,
Mm,
"Rob, it's time for a new season in your life. It's time for you to recommit, not
mm,
retire." Because I
mm.
was thinking about slowing down, and so in doing
Interesting.
that and exploring that and really think about what God was calling me to do, what I realized was that in my work as a coach, I am blessed that I get to talk with a lot of advisors about their faith and how that
Mm,
impacts their businesses and their lives. But it's kind of a secondary conversation. I've never put it out front. And so what I decided to do with the Purpose Focused Advisor Mastermind is bring together cohorts of Christian men who have an interest in having more faith forward businesses. So we get an opportunity to create their blueprints, to meet together in brotherhood, to pray together, to work together, because um, that kind of activity is exactly the kind of thing that you need to be able to do to be able to have that succession plan, to be able to uh, know what you're going to do, to practice your retirement, if you will. So that's what the mastermind is all about. I apologize for the story, but as you can tell, I get kind of excited
No,
about it
so
no
because it's
apologies
a
no,
needed.
no. So I want to say to that because if you're listening to this, and I got this, we can see it in your face for those of you that who have been watching this video. I wrote down your greatest stress. If you're listening to this, your greatest stress is not doing what you know you should be doing. And your greatest joy is doing what you know you should be doing. And Rob, you lit up with, I'm going to keep working and here's what it is. And that's again, because you're now going to go do what you should be doing. But if you're listening to this and you are just stressed out, you're not yourself, you're frustrated, you're not probably doing what in your mind you have told yourself and told yourself you should be, and get help and get change. Because one of the other things you do, Rob, is you help coach advisors. You shared a couple examples of that. So Rob is a resource, if you're listening to this, that you don't know how to figure this out. And sometimes coaching can help you do the things you need to do, whether it's in golf or in health and fitness or nutrition. There are associates out there, Rob is one of them, that can help you process what this purpose is for you.
I was listening to a podcast a couple of months ago. It's called the Purpose and Passion podcast by Louis Giglio, who is a
Oh, yeah.
pastor of, I think, Passion Church in
Mhm.
Atlanta. And he was interviewing Max Lucado, the
Oh,
author.
wow.
And Louis in that podcast always asks his guests, "How do you define purpose?" And um, and this is a great exercise to get people started. What Max answered was, think about what you love doing. And then secondarily, think about what other people love that you do. What do you love doing? What do other people love that you do? And he said, I'll bet you at that intersection, you're going to find your purpose.
Mm.
At that intersection, you're going to find your purpose. And so we probably could have cut this podcast short and just gone straight to those two questions. But I think I love exercises like that allow you to either discover your purpose, start thinking about your purpose, true up your purpose, test your purpose. And so I love those two questions.
Now, Rob, this has been a very inspirational and actually tangible episode. So whoever's listening to this, they'll actually be able to take something away. So thank you so much. I would love to ask you, what's one thing you want listeners to walk away with today?
This might sound like I'm copping out, but go ask yourself those two questions. Go ask yourself, what do I love to do? What do other people love that I do? And do I see that in what I am doing in my business, in my life, in my plans for succession? And do they come together? Do they map out? Because it's just so important to have that purpose, to be the North Star, the guide stone to anything that you're trying to do.
All right. So that's going to be a wrap for today. Rob, thanks again for hanging out and sharing your perspective. We will link your book, your podcast. We'll even grab the one that you just listed for Louis Giglio if people want to actually listen to that so people can connect with you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I really
Thanks, Rob.
enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah. So thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back soon with more conversations like this.
These conversations are designed to support your next move, however close or far it may be. Tap subscribe and let each episode guide you closer to a confident, well-planned exit. I've wrestled with these things myself, and that's exactly why I created something to help you do it with less stress and more direction. My book, Total Succession, is now available on Amazon. Inside, I break the process down into 5 clear steps to help you exit on your terms with confidence, full compensation, and your client's best interests at heart. You can also visit totalsuccession.com/podcast to download a free starter guide that walks you through my SPACE framework: see, prepare, act, commit, exit. Remember, you only exit your business once. Create the space to do it well. Thanks for listening. Until next time.